Now, this is a Luke Shepherd directed musical, which means one thing. Yes, there is a lift right in the middle of the stage. The Little Big Things is a musical based on the true story of Henry Fraser. When Henry was 17, he suffered a life-changing injury that left him disabled. And this musical explores his journey through that and how he adjusted to his new life. This musical is being staged at Soho Place, or at Soho Place if you want to go by the marketing. How am I meant to say this in a sentence coherently? I don't know. So, is this musical successful? And does it manage to deliver some strong disabled representation? Let's find out. But if you haven't seen my face before, hi, I'm Ellie. I talk about theatre. I do reviews, I do discussions, I do video essays, and if any of that sounds interesting to you, please consider hitting like and subscribe. It really helps me out, it helps out the channel. But let's talk about the little big things, because there are many big things that we need to talk about, and a couple of little things too. Let's start by discussing the story of this musical, which I think they do a pretty good job retelling. It's very clear, and it's made even clearer by the front of the programme, that they were trying to avoid the very typical inspiration plotline which is usually slapped onto stories surrounding disabled people. Nikki Miles Walden, who was a dramaturg and associate director on this production, describes it as thus. We didn't want to make a story that felt worthy. It had to have a lot of fun and humour. We also wanted to avoid the traditional inspirational story around disability, something I call inspiration porn. This isn't a story where the non-disabled characters are moved by the central disabled character. It's a story about family and connections, where everyone has to adapt to Henry's new reality and way of life. And because it's being performed in the round, the audience will be really drawn into these family connections too. I think that really is sold for this musical. It is very successful at delivering a story about that. This is a story about Henry, and it dives into the people around him. It dives into his family. It dives into their struggles to adapt with it. But it never feels like they are the focus. It never feels like they are the main characters. I think there was probably a bit more space within the length of this show to put even more focus onto Henry, put even more focus on. There's a lot of like skips in the journey of recovery. We kind of jump around a little bit. And we never really see, like, the full length of the journey. But he's still a very interesting central character, and there's a lot of really interesting elements to the show where they talk about the connection to before the accident, where they talk about how life-changing this is. And honestly, I think what is just the most beautiful thing is being able to watch disabled actors on stage perform this story. This theatre in the West End, there are 39 West End theatres. This is the only one where this musical can be staged. And that is not because of how they decide to stage it. It's because of backstage accessibility. There are so few West End stages. There are so few stages around the country that are accessible to disabled people. There are so few front of houses that are accessible to disabled patrons. And I think the story does a really great job at reflecting this. Maybe not with the theatre-specific angle, but through the character that Amy Trigg plays, Agnes. She has a lot more experience being disabled. She is almost like a mentor figure to Henry. And there's an amazing speech that she delivers towards the end of Act 1, where she's talking about how being disabled in real life is. How even the littlest things will make her more and more disabled. These moments in the show are so unbelievably powerful. I think there is such a beauty about theatre that you can get involved into these stories and completely dive into these stories of experiences that you don't necessarily have. I'm not disabled. I am not a disabled person. I don't know what it's like to be disabled. But by speaking to disabled people, you get a wider understanding of the struggles that they go through and the things that they have to adapt to that you would never even picture as a struggle. Theatre is a great way to tell these stories, and it's why it's so important to have shows like this, to have shows for disabled people, to have shows for people of different races, for trans people, for LGBTQ people. All of these different representations are so important because it's showing people who don't have that lived experience what it is like. And that's been my rant. I think those are the elements of the story that really, really work. I love how it's a story about family. I think it's such an easy way in to the story, and these relationships that are built up feel so truthful and honest and are really engaging to watch. You really feel for every single family member as they come to terms with what's happened. The music in the show is fine. When I left the theatre, I was a little bit more positive on it, but as I've kind of let it settle, I've realised it's a little bit weaker than I would like. I think there are some great songs in here, and I think there are some songs that really get close to being amazing. But it's missing that one song that every single musical needs, that sells it. That you point to that song and go, yes, this is what this musical is about. This is what this musical is selling to me. This is why this musical is so great. It's missing that. There's a lot of comparisons to Dear Evan Hansen with this musical. When people were watching like previews and when they were kind of marketing themselves, they were advertising it a little bit like Evan Hansen with like the upbeat, like the yes, we're gonna get through this and it's gonna be great. There is a knock at my door and I need to go answer it.
A few minutes later.
Okay, I've answered my door. I'm back now. And yes, it does have a song at the end of Act 1 that has a very You Will Be Found vibe. But I don't think it's as memorable as Evan Hansen. I think the songs are cute. I think they work in context of the show, but a lot of them are just very typical British poppy sounding musical theatre songs. The other two songs that get close to being the song of the show are 1 to 17, which is a song for the mother, which really does start to build up that emotional punch to it. It starts to build up a really strong emotional attachment as the mother is kind of expressing her love for her son, how she's like had all of these expectations and dreams for her son, and how this is all going to suddenly change because of the son's new disability and because of the accident that he's gone through. And Miles is probably one of the show's strongest songs. Like, that's a song I would go away and listen to over and over again. And the rest of the score is pretty okay. It's good. Yeah, it's fine. But it's nothing to write home about. It's nothing we haven't seen before. There is also a song in the show, and this is not criticism. This is an off-center, typical Ellie off-center piece of knowledge that I noticed and found funny, and I'm going to mention it because I thought it was funny. There's a song in the show that has the exact same opening like 3 piano notes to Obviously from the Great British Bake Off musical. Literally, it's the bum, 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 bum. And I was half expecting Grace Moat to walk in and just go, everyone is so polite or nice to meet you. Love that dress. I think what really sells the show though, and the show's strongest elements, are the choreography, the staging, and the direction. Let's start with the choreography. So they got in the deaf choreographer Mark Smith to choreograph this production, and I think he was such a good choice for this show. There's a lot of sign language which is really well baked into a lot of the choreography, which feels very natural and adds a further element of representation to a show that is already, you know, doing a really good job at showing disabled representation. It's a touch that they did not need to do. There is no deaf character in this show. There's no discussions about deaf people in the show. But it's a nice meta thing. It's a nice addition that makes the show feel even more inclusive. And then there's Luke Shepherd's staging, which really takes advantage of the space that they are in. He uses loads of flies, which are attached to the top. He flies about the two Henrys in a sequence that is absolutely beautiful, which I would compare to something like the Dream Ballet from Billy Elliot, if you've ever seen that, where little Billy's on the wires, but they're both kind of like flying together and doing it. And then there's a sequence where you learn more about the actual accident, which is kind of alluded to throughout the show, but you never actually see it until later, which is also done with the younger Henry on wires. These sequences provide some really striking images with the fog and the mist coming in, and it feels very ethereal and dreamlike. It is beautiful to watch on stage. I love the screens on the floor. I love the different paint strokes, that's it. The different paint strokes in the design elements of the show, alluding to, you know, what Henry's passion will be like in the future, and, you know, how he eventually finds his muse and stuff like that. And it's also very beautiful. I love the lift in the middle. I know it's a Luke Shepherd classic, and he had to have it, but I actually do think it works in this show and adds a nice extra level to the set in some of the more bigger dance sequences, for example. I think the staging really works in the round. A lot of shows that are staged in the round, you can often wonder why they're being staged in the round. Not every single one feels like it needs to be, but this is a show that I can't picture being done any other way. The staging feels so purposeful, it feels so intimate, and being all around it, we feel so immersed into this family drama and this story that they're trying to tell. Let's move on to talk about this cast. So we're going to start with the Henry roles. The roles of Henry, because there's two Henrys. They split the role of Henry into pre-accident Henry and post-accident Henry. Pre-accident being played by Johnny Ames, and post-accident being played by Ed Larkin, who also narrates the show in a similar way to how he would in the memoir. I think there's a lot of really great contrast that is done with these two performers, as you kind of learn that, like, the reason that they're staged like this is to reflect always looking back on yourself before the accident, or always having that person who you were before there, which is a really nice way to stage that disabled experience. These two performers are amazing. They really work well together. They have a lot of differences between them, but they still feel very truthfully the same person. Ed Larkin is such a wonderful narrator to the whole show. He feels like a really warm presence, and he really kind of takes you into his arms as an audience member through this show. And as we go into Act 2, as we go into the sequences where he's taking over as Henry, where he's getting to show his frustration or his discomfort at the massive change that he's going through, he feels so unbelievably human. These two performers are incredible in this show. And so are Lindsay Hatley and Alistair Harvey, who play Henry's mum and dad. You can tell through the performance that they are literally trying everything they can do for their son. They're trying to navigate some very difficult circumstances and some very big changes. And these two really deliver on some of the most emotional sequences in the show. I really love the relationship that all of the brothers have as well. Jordan Benjamin, Jamie Chatterton, and Cleve September play the three brothers to Henry. Again, they all have different ways of reacting to the change. I think what's really interesting is watching the different interactions pre-injury and post-injury. They have a really lovely family chemistry, and the brotherly relationship really is portrayed well to an audience. Melinda Paris gets a really lovely small role in this show as the doctor in the NHS. She gets this absolutely fabulous number which she sells amazingly, complete with like a full reveal outfit, and I think she's a really fun addition to the show. But the standout performance of the night, the person who gives the biggest impact, is Amy Trigg as Agnes. She gets the best material in this show. I think there is no doubt about it. She gets some of the most impassioned monologue, she gets some of the funniest moments, she gets to play around and be a little bit flirty at times. And she really is this, like, voice of reason for all of this. She's truthful, she's honest, She is brutal at times, but you can always tell it's coming from a place of love. Amy Trigg, out of everyone in the show, is the person who most deserves the Olivier nomination this year. Her performance is incredible in this show. I think The Little Big Things is a very strong 4-star production. I think with some more time in the oven with some of the music in the show, it could probably go up to 5 stars pretty easily. It has some great representation. It has some stories that we really rarely get to see in musical theatre or even on any stage in the country. It's so important to be telling these stories and telling these stories truthfully. And I think Henry's story is a great place to start. I would recommend this musical. I think it's a very enjoyable watch. I think it's a lot of fun. I think it manages to tell this story very truthfully and to provide a lot of discussion surrounding disabled experiences that we may not really understand or we may not really typically see as able-bodied people. But what do you think? Have you seen The Little Big Things? I'm really interested in hearing from disabled people who have seen The Little Big Things. What did you think? Did you think it was good representation? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below. If you did enjoy this video, please consider hitting like and subscribe. It really helps me out, it helps out the channel. Here's some links to my videos on screen right now, and a link to my Instagram if you'd like to drop me a follow over there. But that's it for me today, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!